Okay, folks, so yes, good morning. You'll have to forgive me, I also arrived late last night at 1 a.m. or so I only had a couple of hours sleep. You know, normally when I do talks like this, they invite me because I visited every country in the world, right? And then already you have everybody in the palm of your hand because they're like, oh my God, this guy's visited every country in the world. And then this is a tough crowd because like 25% of people have already done that. But all is not lost. Okay, so my name is Johnny Ward. I'm from Ireland. You can hear from the accent. I'm a travel blogger. I recently turned 41 years old. And as I said, I also have visited every country in the world. I finished about 5 or 6 years ago. And then after that, I set my sights on what's called the Ultimate Explorers Grand Slam, the 7 summits, many other marathons and ultramarathons and cycling across countries, North Pole, South Pole. And now I'm here. I live in Thailand. And all these life goals that you guys also are afflicted by, that we can't escape, they come at a cost, especially with the physical challenges. So let me just show you a few of my injuries along the way. It gets worse. Wait for the last one. This is a regular occurrence for me. Every 3 months, maybe, I'm in hospital for something. This one we talk about later, don't worry. This one we talk about later also. Okay, let me tell a little bit about my story. So it's very easy for me to stand up here as another generic white guy telling you how amazing I am and all the amazing things that I've done, and you've heard it all before, right? So please just indulge me while I tell you my story and why I feel like I'm pushed to do these crazy things and live my life like this. Hopefully it's not just another white guy. So I was actually born in Inishmore. And again, normally Inishmore is an island in Ireland. And normally, again, when I tell people that, any other audience in the world, no one has ever heard of it. But here, I guess, probably half of you guys have heard of it at least. It's the island from the movie with Colin Farrell, The Banshees of Inisherin, if you've ever seen it. So I was born there. And my childhood was pretty rough. So I'm going to cover it quite quickly because it's quite emotional. So my father wasn't the greatest guy, but my mum's a bit of a superstar. So when my mum went into labour on the island of Inishmore, we were rushed by speedboat to Galway, where I was born. And my mother dealt with a lot of domestic violence and alcoholism, and my father was in and out of prison, and it was very tough for her. So anyway, right from birth, we're talking about extremes, right? So first I'll tell you about my extreme life, and then I'll tell you about my extreme travel. Even from birth, I feel like I was destined for this dangerous, chaotic life. When my mum went into labour and we were in hospital in Galway, I was born with my umbilical cord around my neck, strangled and rushed to ICU for 2 or 3 days. And then 2 or 3 days later, my mum was also recovering and she was getting discharged, ready to take me home. And this is not a very good indictment of Irish healthcare, but the story I'm about to tell you. But anyway, we'll carry on. The nurse hands John Ward, 9th of December, 1983, to my mum. And my mum is hysterical. This is not my baby. This is not my baby. And people think, okay, some Irish hysterical mother, it's normal. Just send her on her way. But because I had the umbilical cord around my neck when I was born, I had this huge red scar. And actually, for anyone who knows Ireland, my surname is Ward, and that's quite an Irish traveller name. It's 2025, so maybe we're not allowed to use the word gypsy anymore, but that is the background of my surname. And there was an Irish traveller baby called John Ward the same day, and they handed my mum the wrong baby. And only I was born with my umbilical cord and had this red mark around my neck. Thankfully, she knew it, and they switched the babies and sent her on her way. So anyway, I ended up with the right mom. I hope, who knows, actually. But then, sadly, that meant that we had to go back to Inishmore, where my father was, and it was turmoil for my mum. So the next 2 or 3 years, my father would go missing for months on end, sometimes to prison, sometimes on some drunken bender. And my mum ended up fleeing, and we ended up living in a domestic violence house. We used to call it like a battered woman's house. I know it's not very politically correct, but that's what we used to call it. And then I grew up there with my sister and my mum. And my uncle, obviously Irish as well, was living in England at the time. And he had heard that my mum was going through this terrible situation. My mum hadn't told anyone she had had children. She had moved down south, got with this bad guy, and was ashamed that her life had turned this way. And my uncle, 2 or 3 years later, had discovered that this had happened, and he hopped on a ferry with his car and then drove down to Ireland, down to Inishmore, and he kidnapped me and my sister and my mum. And we moved up north to Kilkeel, if you can see, just in the north there, where we changed our names and lived. I grew up there then, so my father couldn't find us. And then I lived there for the next 15 years until I was, or 13 years, till I was 18 years old. And life was still chaos then. And you know, this is something I think about now. I'm 41, I think about it a lot. For people who've got like difficult family situations, this life of extreme travel that I'll continue to talk about over the next half an hour or so, I wonder where it comes from, you know, and that chaos that you have. Even now, I hope that I'm a good guy. I know that I've got 50% of that DNA, of my father's DNA, and it's quite a sombering thought to think that that is half the blood pumping through your body is the blood of someone you'd wish it wasn't, you know. But hopefully I'm on the right track. So then high school was, as you would expect, getting in trouble, suspensions, blah, blah, blah. And then my mum was in a state of depression. You know, this is very common when women escape domestic violence. She was obese, she was unemployed, we were on welfare for 15 years. And it was kind of then that I would see my friends going on holiday, even to Spain, even to England. I never left. We didn't have a car. We had no central heating. We never even took the boat to England next door. We had no money. And I remember, like, during summer holidays, watching my friends go on holiday to Spain, or the rich ones would head off to Disneyland in Orlando or whatever. And I'm just thinking, wow, imagine what it must look like in another country. Imagine hearing other languages. Imagine eating other foods. And I never experienced it my whole childhood. And it was then really at 18 that I decided, okay, I need to make sure my life is free. Financially free, of course, we need that. As we all know, we've all spent a bloody fortune on this stupid quest of ours. But also free to make decisions, to go on adventures without having to ask permission all the time. So I went to university in England for 4 years. I studied international economics, ran up a massive load of student debt that I now live in Thailand and have never paid. Thank you for the system. And that really began my journey to every country in earnest. But don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with an every country story because you guys are almost all there. Then from 22 years old, I should actually tell you, I finished my university degree and I wanted to travel, right? That was my goal, as I said. I wanted to be free. But I had no money. None of this gap year stuff. My mum didn't have any money to help me pay for it, nor should she. So the way I started my journey was, this is like a shameful thing to admit. Do you guys, have you ever heard of something called medical research? So I got locked in a hospital in Belfast for 5 weeks in a room, like just in a corner here. And you're not allowed out of the hospital. You don't get paid. And you stay in it for 5 weeks. And they install like a plastic cannula, it's called, in your veins, because they have to inject you like 18 times a day. And I did that for 5 weeks. You have to eat all the food they give you because the variables have to be consistent for the other people in the medical research. And then after 5 weeks, they let you free. And I got paid $3,000 for that. And with that $3,000, I booked a one-way ticket to Thailand, and I became an English teacher in Thailand. And that was 2007. And that was the start of my journey to every country in the world. So then over the next 12 years, did I do that? Or is it already there? Did you do that for me? Wow. Okay, and I'm sure a lot of your guys' Google Maps look like this too, right? So this was the next 12 years of my life. I taught English in Thailand for a year. And then when we talk about extreme travel, and I'll go on to talk about Everest and rowing across oceans and running across countries later, but when they ask me to speak about extreme travel can mean a lot of things. You can travel, like, has anyone been to Timbuktu here? Yeah, that is a mad ratio of people to have been to Timbuktu. And this is why I won't be talking about Timbuktu. We chartered a flight to go there. I'm sure you guys did something else, something similar. And oh no, oh wow, with the boat, even better. Okay, like this. Or I went recently last year to Zangasanga National Park. Do you guys know that one in Central African Republic? Anyone been there? God, this is mad. Okay. So when they asked me to speak about extreme travel, I knew that I'm not going to bore you guys with these stories because you guys have these stories. So of course I have a lot of extreme travel stories along the way. Mostly it came because I was so young. I was only 22 and I was still broke. My English teaching job was paying me $450 a month. And I was living in some hovel in Chiang Mai trying to save. So then the next 2 years of my life, I traveled for maybe $5,000 full-time travel, sleeping on the side of the street and on buses and wherever I could find. And I got to 20, 30, 40 countries like that, broke as a joke. And, you know, on a side note, when I was traveling like that and I saw wealthier people, older people, maybe like I am now, I always said, this is also awful. When I'm that age or when I've got that much money, I'm always going to travel like this, $5 a day. It's so much better. And the second I could afford it, never go back. Never go back. That's terrible. So then on we went. From 2007 as an English teacher all the way up to 2017, I finished my final country. I call it 197. I know this is a very controversial topic. Maybe we'll save it for a glass of wine tonight. I called it 197, so 193 plus Kosovo, Palestine, Taiwan, bargain. And then I finished when I was 33 years old, which at the time was quite young, but now I see crazy 15, 16-year-olds finishing it. At the time, I thought it was quite accomplished, but then we moved on. So a lot of you guys, I heard that there's 42 of you that have visited every country in the world. And for me, for a lot of you, you have careers, right? And you have families. Now I do now, just recently. But for me, this was my whole life, you know? A lot of you guys have normal lives and you do this as a side. This was my whole life. I was a blogger. I had nothing else. I was on my own. No one else to worry about. And then this 11 years of full-time travel, I traveled maybe 9 or 10 months every year, and then 2 months I would spend in Thailand. When it finished, I thought I was going to feel, I'd never achieved anything in my life before. And then when I finished, I thought I was going to feel like Conor McGregor walking down the street, like an absolute legend. And actually, it was the complete opposite. And I would be interested to speak to the 41 others who finished every country. I thought I was going to feel like walking into every room. Everyone's like, would you like a Guinness? Oh, a Guinness. That reminds me of the time when I visited my 197th country. Yeah. And actually, it was the complete opposite. I was depressed. And I've never been depressed before, but I spun out into like a crazy 12-month depression. Drinking every day. My business went to shit. Never updated my blog. Nothing on social media. I moved back to Thailand and I was lost. Seriously, seriously lost. And I've never felt like that before. So then that obviously begged the question. Oh, sorry, should have gone through that. Did you guys do this? Anyone do this? Where is Louis? Sorry, I forgot to talk about that. Let me go back to that. Wow, this is great. Yeah, this is how I met Louis. We were on actually, this is a side note. This was when I was thinking, should I talk about traveling to destinations? Socotra, wow, it's Yemen. Everyone's been to Yemen, so I cut it. But I'm sure a lot of you guys know, before the flights went from Cairo and now UAE, the only way to get to Yemen, and I was trying to finish my countries. It was my 196th, my second last country, and I couldn't get into the bloody country. There was a war. I tried to go in over land, and I tried and failed, and that's when I met Louis. He chartered we chartered that flight from Oman, and I got turned around mid-air and sent back. And when actually it was the following month after getting rejected with you, but thank you for helping me or trying to help me. It was after that I didn't go back to Thailand. I stayed in Oman, and I said, excuse my language, I am not leaving this fucking country until I get to Yemen. So I went to Salalah and I stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks. I went to some bar to watch the Liverpool game and I met this Socotrian refugee, Yahya his name was, and I was telling him that 197 countries, I've been to 195, this is going to be 196. And he said, oh, I send stuff, I send cement pallets there every week or two, like maybe I can get you on the boat. And we stayed there and I spent the next 4 days on a boat to get to Yemen, and finally I got there anyway. Better. That's the toilet hanging over the side. And that's the sleeping quarters. Every time at night, God, this brings back memories. Every time at night on the top, can you go back? Yeah. Every time at night, I would turn my head torch on, and as soon as I turned it on, there would be like 80 cockroaches just scuttling away. Never again. Okay, anyway, so I finished 197 countries, like a lot of you guys, and then that begged the question. This is me in my last country, actually. Can you play that? Okay, that's enough self-indulgence. We talk extreme travel again now, what they brought me here for. So then extreme travel. I wouldn't actually call now, we all have different risk profiles, of course, and we all have different bars of what does it mean for extreme travel, right? Like I said, normally I would tell the Yemen story or the Zangasanga or Timbuktu and everyone's impressed, but with you guys it's that. And also for me, I just find it fun. I don't think it's some out there. Now I feel like you have to risk your life if you want to call it extreme travel. So then, okay, that's what I do. So I figured, what could I do then to find my purpose again? I got depressed. I was overweight. I was blackout drunk, living in Bangkok. Could you think of a worse place to live if you're drinking too much and nothing to do? I was in Bangkok. So that year went mad. And then actually, I took the Trans-Siberian Railway, try to find some purpose again in my life. And I met a Russian guy called Sergei. And Sergei is a big traveler. He owns a tour company called Elbrus Tours, which is obviously a mountain climbing. And I told him, I'm very honest. And I said, like, oh, I thought I was going to be a hero, and now I feel like a loser. Like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And he said, come and climb Mount Elbrus with me for free. You don't have to worry about it. And I went to Elbrus and I climbed Elbrus with him. And I'm sure you guys must know Elbrus is the highest mountain in Europe, right? I actually thought it was Mont Blanc until I met Sergei. So I climbed Elbrus, Europe's highest mountain, which at the time for me was a massive thing. Europe's highest mountain, like I'm finding purpose again. Maybe I can create a new goal and feel like I'm following a path I should be following rather than this lost soul in Thailand. And then that gave birth, really. Thank you. And I think you guys will resonate with this. Like when you first start traveling and you go to Kenya or Tanzania and you're like, oh, I've been to Africa. And then you go to West Africa and you're like, oh, okay, this is actually Africa. And then you go to Central Africa and then your friend is like, oh, I was in Kenya once. And you're like, oh, were you? Okay. That's what happened to me with Elbrus. I climbed Elbrus and suddenly my bar had gone, wow, this is one of the 7 summits. Like I'm just some skinny, fat white guy from Ireland, and now I've climbed Elbrus. And I had actually done Kilimanjaro, like in flip-flops, half hungover a few years previously. So I was like, whoa, I've accidentally done 2 of the 7 summits. Maybe I can actually make something here, do some cool escapades. And I will forever be grateful to Sergei for that, because this pushes the envelope, you know? Like as soon as you achieve something like this, you think, oh, maybe I can do the next thing, maybe I can do the next thing, maybe I can do the next thing. And that's what led me then at the North Pole. I will talk about these a little bit more. I will talk about this a lot. I rode across the Atlantic from Canary Islands to the Americas, 2 months, unsupported. It was absolutely terrible. This is how we slept. And this is obviously the before and after. And that was where the photographs from the hands, but I'll talk a little bit about Row later because it's pretty wild. And then this is at the top of Vinson in Antarctica. And this is running across the Sahara. Okay, so then this was when I was a young drunk packer climbing Kilimanjaro. That's a pretty easy climb. Then I met Sergei, of course, a few years later at the top of Elbrus. Anyone climbed Elbrus here? Nice. That doesn't count. But I'm going again next year if you want to do it properly. This is the top of, anyone can recognize? Aconcagua in Argentina, highest mountain. This is South America's highest mountain. This is Karsten's Pyramid, Australasia's highest mountain. That's the fake Australian one. What's that called? Thank you. That's Mont Blanc, also fake one. And that is Denali. Anyone climb Denali? God, that's a tricky one. That is cold. And then Everest. And then finished it. So I met Sergei. I climbed Elbrus, and I thought, okay, I can really do something. I've done 2 of the 7 summits. This Explorer's Grand Slam called is 7 summits plus North Pole, South Pole. I've done 2 of them. They weren't that hard. They were hard, but not that hard. Okay, so now I need to think about North Pole and South Pole. And then Googled how to go to the North Pole. And I'm sure, actually, again, weird audience, I'm sure you guys have all looked at that before too. And it costs a fortune. So then, I'd never run any marathons or anything like that before. But the cheapest way for me to go to the North Pole was to go with this Irish guy, you can't escape us, who ran something called the North Pole Marathon. It was the cheapest way to get to the North Pole. So I signed up to do the North Pole Marathon. I'd never been in these kind of conditions before. So I was living in Thailand and training for this marathon in Thailand in plus 30 heat. And I borrowed my friend's ski gear, because I didn't have any cold weather gear. And I flew to Svalbard. And from Svalbard, with the North Pole Marathon, or anyone been to the North Pole? This is great. At the North Pole, then, the way it works for anyone who hasn't been, Russians fly some plane over the top of it and drop some guys out, and then they hand dig a small runway, and then a bigger plane comes and drops like a small articulated digger, and then that digs a bigger runway, and then a proper plane can land. That's how it works. So then we land on the proper runway. And when I got there, I'm with all these like hardcore athletes, and I'm like, oh shit, what have I signed up for here? And we get rushed into this like military tent with the Russians, and I'm wearing my Thai friends' rented ski gear, and we're sitting there, and then they're like, oh, when we hit the buzzer, we're going to start the marathon. Go outside. I was like, okay. So we sit there for like 2 hours, and they hit the buzzer, and everyone starts getting all these energy gels and electrolytes. They start putting all this special cold weather running gear, and they're like, Johnny, take off the gear and put on your proper stuff. And I was like, this is my proper stuff. This is all I have. So I ran the North Pole Marathon, finished 8th, thank you, and ahead of those guys with all the gear, no idea, we call it. And when the marathon finished, you take a helicopter to the North Pole so you can be at the geographic North Pole, of course. And then when we went to leave, this is a cool little quirk. This is the runway. I don't know is the video working there? Can you play it? When we went to leave, we got told that we couldn't leave because the runway had split in 2. And we were completely stuck there for 3 days. Like, that is literally where the plane lands. I was actually scared. The Russians couldn't care less. They had endless supplies of booze in their military tent, and they were not bothered in the slightest. And then those guys were the ones that had to come out and hand dig a new runway. So anyway, 3 days later, we escaped. But the North Pole Marathon actually ended up costing, to run the North Pole Marathon was something like $20,000, 20,000 euro. It's a lot of money, right? And it ended up costing me a lot more. So again, like how I get myself into these like experiences, it's naivety, really. I just dream of the end and think, imagine visiting every country. You don't think how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, right? Imagine running a marathon at the North Pole. You don't think how cold it's going to be, how much gear you need. And then when I was in the North Pole Marathon, I was in this tent with this military guy, and I said, like, wow, this is cool. This is the hardest race in the world, and it's my first race, and I'm a hero. And he said to me, oh yeah, this is quite hard, but there's a race in the Sahara that's far harder. It's called the Marathon des Sables. And I was like, fucking hell, okay, right. So I'll sign up for that anyway. So then I signed up for this Marathon des Sables, I'm sure. Anyone here done that? Yes! For those that don't know, it's about 200 miles something through the Sahara across 5 or 6 days, but it's self-sufficient, so you have to bring all your own food and everything for the 6 days. And it was torture. And I'd never run a marathon before the North Pole. Now I'd run one marathon, and then I signed up for this. This was what, I don't know, 7 marathons, I think, in 5 days or something, on the sand. And that's where, I don't know if the photograph's here, but that's where you saw that photograph. I should have warned you guys before I put it up. So, and that is marketed. The MDS, as it's called, the Marathon des Sables, is marketed as the hardest race in the world. Okay, so I did the North Pole Marathon, and I finally have actually done the hardest race. Thank Christ, I can get away from this nonsense. And in my tent at the MDS, there was this Marine, and he said to me, I was like, "This is the hardest race in the world." He's like, "Yeah, it's probably the hardest race. It's probably the hardest thing you can do on land." That's great. Okay. He's like, "Oh yeah, last summer I rode across the Atlantic." I was like, okay, right. So then I end up doing this. So I had never been in a boat before. Like I told you, I come from a poor background, right? Single parent, on welfare, blah blah blah. I told you guys, and a boat for like rich white people. I'm a poor white person, so I had never even been on a boat apart from the cargo ship to Yemen, and I find this opportunity on a Facebook group. It was 2020, and this company said, you know how when you're speaking all the time, talking nonsense with your friends, phone hears you, right? And then it obviously targets you with ads. That happened to me, and then this Facebook group came up, people who want to row the Atlantic, and this guy here beside me, he put this thing saying, "There's been one person drop out. We're rowing the Atlantic in 6 weeks. Does anyone want to come?" And I called my mom and called my missus, and I was like, "God, do you think I should do this?" And they're like, "Yeah." So I took swim lessons in Bangkok for the next 4 weeks, and then signed up for this thing. So the way it works.
This is our
It takes 2 months. It
50%
leaves
of our life.
from the Canary Islands
Watching
and
Matt
Portugal,
slowly waste away.
and then it's like 55 days or whatever. There's 4 people.
50% of the time,
They have a race
upstairs,
actually where
very
it's a
naked
supported
in the
race,
other opposite
but we didn't have
direction,
enough money
50%
to enter that race, so we did it completely unsupported, just our
that's our
boats and
life.
us. So there would be me and my partner here, obviously, and then the other 2 guys rowing, and it goes 2 hours rowing, 2 hours resting, 24 hours a day for 2 months. So you sleep like 4 sets of 30 minutes a day or something for 2 months. Absolutely awful. And this is the funny thing about extreme travel, and also like when you like achieve big things. I know this sounds cool and it makes me look cool, but the thing about it is, like, on day 1, I thought to myself, super seasick, I have made a terrible mistake. And there is no way you can't get off, you know? So now, like, I could sit here and pretend that it was amazing and it was easy for me, but actually, I couldn't quit. I would love to have quit. But I was stuck. And this boat, I did it with this English guy. I don't want to mention any names in case anyone's considering it, but also, this boat had never been on water before. They had chartered. They couldn't afford to buy it from the proper organization, so they custom built one. And on day 1, we set off from Tenerife, and I was so seasick. Like, you're rowing like this, 2 hours throwing up, rowing, throwing up, and then when you're sleeping, you're not sleeping because it's like this, right? And on day 1, water piling into the sleeping cabin, and there was a hole in the side of the boat, and we had to get rescued by the Canary Islands Coast Guard on day 1, and then we get towed to another island, to Gran Canaria. And actually, to be honest, there I did have a chance to quit. We had to get the boat fixed. And I really thought, deeply thought, like we stayed in a hotel that night. I'm lying in bed, like crying, being like, I don't want to get back in that boat. Should I quit? Should I not quit? Anyway, I didn't quit, and the boat got fixed. And then we spent the next 2 months on the boat. That's the before and after. And that was quite an amazing experience, to be honest. And once I had done that, don't play that yet, second. Once I had rowed the Atlantic, that is, I feel like, a legitimate extreme experience. You know, a lot of things that you do, that we do. People in the real world, in the normal world, I should say, it feels extreme what we do to them. But for us, it's our bread and butter. Even flying here for a conference like in Ethiopia, your normal friends probably think you're all mental, right? And I also think it's a bit mental, but this one was right at the edge for me. So then when I finally got to Bahamas, when we finished, I truly then felt like my imposter syndrome, which we all suffer from, I'm sure, had gone. I really had climbed some of the hardest mountains in the world. I had run some of the hardest ultra marathons in the world. I had cycled across countries. I'd obviously visited every country, and now I had rowed across the Atlantic. So now it was time for me to get back to the 7 summits. And obviously, with the 7 summits, 6 of them are kind of okay, right? Kilimanjaro is kind of easy. Elbrus is like not too bad. Aconcagua in South America is tricky enough. Actually, my buddy went blind there, the one that you met. So, I mean, he's okay now, but yeah. Aconcagua is the highest mountain in South America. I did it with my best friend, and he went blind on the mountain, got helicoptered off, but he came back. There was something with his optic nerve and the altitude. And we got evacuated. We had to go back the next year and climb Aconcagua, but that's still not that hard a mountain. Then Denali in Alaska, that starts to be legitimate. You're there for 3 or 4 weeks. It's minus 30. It's freezing cold. And then, of course, you get to Everest. And Everest, I feel very protective of my experience on Everest, to be honest, for a few reasons. First is when you climb Everest, because it's so iconic, like a positive question that you would get asked a lot is like, did you dream of it as a child? But again, like the boat stuff, this is like a wealthy person's dream, you know? When you grow up, how I grew up, you don't think about Everest. You think about like having a car. You think about having a job. So no, I never dreamed of it. And then secondly, nowadays, I think with the rise of social media, a lot of people that sit at home and would say Everest is a rich person's plaything. Anyone can do it if you can pay for it. And I feel so uber protective over the experience. You guys can say I've done a lot of stuff and a lot more than I showed, especially with like ultra endurance events like cycling across continents or whatever. I'm a fit guy, you know, and this climbing Everest was by far the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. So please, if you take anything from this speech, if you ever hear anyone, some guy living in his mum's basement saying that it's a rich person's plaything, know that that comes from a point of jealousy and negativity, you know. It is everyone who's ever climbed Everest, I feel so strongly and passionately about this, you can see, is a beast. I wanted to quit on that summit day. I've run hundreds and thousands of kilometers, ultramarathons, left, right, and center. And that summit day was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. And then, anyone use Strava here for exercise? If you use Strava, it's like a social media app for running. If you run like 20K this morning, it uploads what you've run, and your friends say like, well done, right? And then the awful thing for your ego about Everest is on the summit day, you're at 8,000 meters at Camp 4. You've come through Khumbu Icefall, Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4. Of course, I'm sure you're all thinking, like, did he see dead bodies? Yes, you see a lot of dead bodies. Actually, there was a dead body. There was a guy died on my rope. Pretty brutal. So you get to high camp. And then you get to the summit and you come down. And I saved it on Strava, my exercise social media. And actually, the distance covered on summit day is 1.1 kilometers. So it saves on my Strava. And at high altitude, your heart rate's low. It says, morning walk, 7 a.m. on my Strava. And you know, I feel like of all the things I've done, and I wasn't expecting to have a huge outpouring of emotion at the summit of Everest. And this is why I'm going to talk about extreme travel at the end, about why I think it's so important for people like me. For men, I can only speak for, but I think for everyone, I think it brings a lot of positivity to your life. I feel like it's very meditative, and I feel like it's truly transformational, because when you do these ultra endurance events, like you're stuck out there for hours and then days and then weeks and months if you're doing something like rowing the Atlantic, and you have nothing but your own thoughts. And in an era where we're plugged into our phones and our laptops, like doing these kind of events or expeditions is the only way that we really connect with ourselves. So that summit day for Everest for me, I thought, again, I can spot a theme here now I'm saying it out loud. I thought I was going to feel great at the top. But again, I just felt a huge outpouring. I felt a lot of gratitude for other people in my life. You know, I did it for my own ego, of course. That's why people climb mountains often. But at the top, it wasn't ego that struck me. It was gratitude for everything that happened in my life and the people who had supported me, especially my mom, along the way. Can we play that video? Is there a clip there? And this was me at the summit. Top of Everest. This is dedicated to all the single moms, little boys growing up with no dads. To the moms, just support the kids. And to the kids, just remember, anything's possible. Oh, just look at me. Anything. Okay, love you all. Thanks, guys. See you on the flip side. And I wasn't expecting that at all. You know, actually, a crypto company had sent me some money to help me sponsor the climb. And I was supposed to do a video for them at the top, and I completely forgot. I just had this outpouring of emotion, and then was like, okay, get me out of this place. So then after Everest, it was my second last mountain for the 7 summits. A lot of times when people do the 7 summits, especially or for people who haven't done the 7 summits, you think that Everest would be the last one. And if you're super wealthy, that is the best way to do it, of course, because you get the glory of Everest for your final mountain. But if these things are expensive, right? Everest is roughly 70 grand these days to climb. It's really expensive. So if you're not super rich, it can't be your last one, because once I could pay for Everest, I should pay for it now, because I don't know if I'll be able to pay for it again, right? So it was my 6th one. Also, it's very dangerous, that price, actually, on a side note, because the risk of failing, I was thinking, like, I can't afford to do this thing again. I've got to get to the top. It makes it quite dangerous. Anyway, Everest was my 6th mountain, and then that left me with South Pole and Mount Vincent in the South Pole, which is the highest mountain in the South Pole. I think we have one person who's climbed Vincent, no? Yeah. That is chilly. Vincent's not that hard, but it's freezing and expensive to get to. And actually, I have a pretty wild story on Vincent. I went with a few friends who were all quite fit as well. And when we landed in Antarctica, you know, a lot of you guys, I'm sure, have taken boats from Ushuaia to Antarctica. But when you're doing expeditions to the South Pole, or if you're climbing mountains, you actually fly in from Punta Arenas in Chile and land deeper in the continent where they have a big base. Union Glacier, the base is called. So we flew in there, and then we flew again on helicopters to the base camp of Mount Vincent. And like, it is fun to make jokes about these mountains, but you see quickly how serious things are. We knew that bad weather was coming in. And I know it's not good to talk about money, but whatever. To go to the South Pole and to climb Vincent cost 92 grand, right? So again, like, you cannot risk failing unless you're made of money, which I'm not. So we knew there was bad weather coming. And the thing about these fees, when you pay this money with the flights and blah, 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 they don't even guarantee you an attempt at climbing these mountains. You know, they just say, we'll provide the logistics to get you in and off the continent. And if the weather's shit, you're on your own. And there's bad weather coming. But our group was fit, so we pushed it and flew into base camp at Vincent. And then the climb is not that bad, 4 or 5 days, but freezing, of course, because it's Antarctica. And we could see the bad weather coming in. And there was another group behind us, another climbing expedition behind us who weren't as fit. And normally when you climb big mountains, I think you probably know, you go to camp 1, acclimatize, camp 2, acclimatize, maybe spend a day, camp 3, spend a day, and then when your body's ready with the blood oxygen, you can make an attempt at the summit, right? And with the bad weather coming, the only way we could get to the summit without the bad weather coming is not acclimatize. We could just go 1, 2, 3, 4, summit and down, which we did, right? And it was, of course, tough, but 92 grand, it's worth being tough. So we got to the summit, and that was fine, beautiful. But the group behind us couldn't do that. They weren't strong enough to skip through the camps. So when we summited, they were acclimatizing at camp 2. And when we came down, they said, oh, we're going to try tomorrow when the bad weather was there, or the following day, perhaps, another day's acclimatization. Okay, I mean, it's not great, but we'll see you later. We'll see you back at Union Glacier in a week. So we descended down the mountain a few days, wait for the weather, and helicoptered back to Union Glacier. And then we go back to Union Glacier, we're celebrating, drinking Malbec by the bottle. And then like 3 days later, that group came in, and one guy had lost his nose, and 2 guys had lost half their hands because they also all paid 92 grand, you know? So they also went for it. And loads of them got really bad frostbite. And that's the nature of the extreme travel, I guess. On it, right? All right, folks. Johnny from onestepforward.com. Here I'm at the South Pole, meaning that every country in the world, 7 summits, North Pole, South Pole, done. Whew, 15 years, a lot of work, but we're over it. Thank you very much, everybody. So I had finished this 15-year goal, but after going through that deep 6 to 12-month depression after finishing my every country in the world spiral, I was ready this time, emotionally ready. I was prepared to know that this isn't the peak of my life. I'm going to live for a long time, I hope. And this awakening that I had, mostly at the summit of Everest, really, I understood that the ego that's driven me to achieve these things, I completely embrace that, and I'm grateful for it, and I think other people should be grateful for it too. We wouldn't achieve these things without our ego. We have to be honest. We're selfish often. Our ego drives us often, it's true, and even more so for someone like me doing this crazy stuff. But when I had these deep, dark experiences and then coming through the other side, I really started to feel like this transformative energy that I feel like I felt compelled to help other people feel that same enlightenment, at the risk of sounding cliche. So my first guinea pig was my lovely mum. She had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 12 years previously. So she had a tough life with my dad, and then 10 years depressed, and we were on welfare, and da-da-da. And suddenly I was doing all this crazy stuff, and I was making all this money from my blog, and I was free. And then she got diagnosed with this chronic illness, and we thought, okay, the freedom that we almost had has been taken away from us. And then together we said, no, that's not what's happened. Let's target the amount of years you are. We should target that amount of countries so you can embrace this Indian summer, this last chapter of your adventure life. And we did that. She's been to about 75 countries since she got diagnosed with me. And then, even that I felt was not the key to our happiness and our fulfillment. I felt my mum is dealing with her Parkinson's disease so well, and I've come through this emotional journey, I hope well, and now it's time to give something back. So we started to have these ideas about raising money for Parkinson's. And also that would give my mum an energy to channel, that she could stay fit and healthy and try to push herself the way I had pushed myself. So we ended up doing 3 big events. We raised $50,000 or $60,000. We did the Serengeti Marathon. We did a 100-kilometer tandem cycle through the desert, Wadi Rum Desert in Jordan, and we climbed Mount Fuji that she summited. Actually, really amazing. You know, I could talk a whole story about my mum climbing Mount Fuji, but I love her so much, and watching how much she pushed herself to get to the summit of Fuji. She collapsed 100 meters after reaching the summit and ended up in hospital. And I know for normal people that sounds horrific, but if you're like a psycho like me, I loved her. I know she tried her absolute best, and how many people can ever say that? She tried her best and succeeded. But actually, if you fail with that level of effort, that's also okay. truly tried your best. No hashtag Instagram try your best. She tried her best, and I love her even more for it. So then this was going really well. My mom was loving her life. I was helping my mom love her life. And that turned into something bigger. I ended up dragging hundreds, maybe thousands now, of other people to other expeditions, to other wild places, running through deserts and cycling across countries. And that's the life that I'm living now. That's to spot a theme. You can take the woman out of Northern Ireland, but you can't take Northern Ireland out of the woman. Okay, so then this is when I try to convince you guys to be idiots like me and just think about the final, the finish line. Don't think about the pain that gets there. So hopefully I've extolled the virtues of what these endurance events can do for you. You know, everyone can do these things. Like, I'm no different than anyone else. Can you just go ahead and play it? Just turn the volume down. So what I did...
The Eye of the Sahara Ultramarathon.
What I've done is, I'm convinced that, especially for men, I can't speak for women, that this is like therapy for me anyway. It's really changed my life and made me into a better person, doing these awful, torturous events. So I've created 2 events. One at the Eye of the Sahara in Mauritania. Anyone ever been to the Eye of the Sahara? Nice.
You'll be a whole new person.
Ever run through it?
When you do these kind of things, speaking from experience, there's a version of you
that we run every December,
slightly better version
that I actually talk about a tour company loses money every year. But the people that come, it changes their life. I had a German guy who won it last year, and he sent me an email a month after the event. He's 38, and he sent me an email saying that he hadn't cried for 28 years and he thought there was something wrong with him. And he would like to say thank you to me for organizing this event because he cried for the first time in 28 years in the shower after the event. Not the pain, I promise. Okay, here's what I believe that is correct for me. I can't speak for you guys. For one, in 2025, I feel like I feel like people are forced to lie about their motivations. We have to pretend to be more virtuous than we are. It's good to tell people, of course, but we still are often inherently selfish people, and we wouldn't achieve the things we achieve without our ego. So I know that ego can be terrible and it can cause terrible things, but none of us would be on our way to 193 or would even get close to it without our ego. So I really don't think it should be demonized. Of course, we have to channel it in the right way, but let's not let postmodern social media try to tell us that we're wrong for wanting to wanting to be the best version of ourselves. I really feel strongly about that. Without ego, where would we be? I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have done anything. And I'm sure you guys can stay the same. The next one is something I feel really strongly about. Resilience is more important than resources. Of course, as I told you, the numbers for Everest and South Pole are ridiculous. But everyone doesn't need to go to Everest and South Pole. And especially if you want to do these endurance events. A pair of sneakers from Decathlon costs $20. You could go and run 1,000 kilometers for $20 and change your life, you know? You can do amazing things for pennies. Those first 2 years, I traveled for $5,000. Sleeping anywhere I could. You know, resilience is more important than resources. Having both, speaking from that 41 is better. But if you only have one thing, resilience. This is one that is targeted to the younger crowd that I hate with all my heart. As an Instagrammer and as a blogger, there's a lot of new wave athletes, I hate to call myself an athlete, but whatever, who go and do cool things like I've done, and then they preach on their social media how legendary they are. Hashtag, I'm built different. Look at me, I'm amazing. You guys could never do this shit. And it's just bullshit, you know? Like, I am not a talented guy. I am not a talented athlete. And I've done cooler stuff than the guys that are doing hashtag built different. It's a lie, but they're incentivized to do it because it puts them apart from us. It makes them, so we can admire them, you know? And it's just not true. Anyone who ever does anything physically challenging, it's just a choice. All I did is choose it, often naively. but I still got through it, and that's all we can do. And this is what I think about my events with the Sahara and Turkmenistan. Even you guys are probably thinking, yeah, I couldn't do it. But you can. Honestly, you can. My mom climbed Mount Fuji at 70 with her Parkinson's. You know, we got to the top. We cycled 100K across Jordan on a tandem. Parkinson's. We can do it. No one is built different. It's just a choice. I feel so strongly about that. I know this isn't quite the right demographic, but these guys and girls telling people that they're built different, it's nonsense. It's just a choice. We just make a choice to do something cool and we do it. The next one is, as you can see from my summit video, to go through the darkness and the pain of these endurance events, which could be hours, weeks, months, is the only way I personally could get to know myself. I'm sure therapy can bring it out in some people, but for me, the only way I got to truly know myself was to go into these deep, dark caves of pain with goals and to break through and come out the other side. And that's why I run these events, even though I lose money on them. Because it changes your life, you know? I feel like you suffer so much for this 1 day or 3 days or 5-day event, whatever it is. But the gift that you give yourself, you love yourself 1% more for the rest of your life. So like these 3 days of pain or 5 days of pain, it is such a cheap price to pay to love yourself more for the rest of your life. And if someone said to you, you just have to suffer for a few days or a few weeks or even a few hours, but you love yourself more, you would do it. And I'm telling you that is the truth. But you've got to do your first one and you'll know what I mean. And then finally, coming from a working class background, growing up on welfare, this is something that's just, you guys are the wrong audience, but I think it's important to say because you all clearly live intentionally. The only way you can be successful enough to attend these events, of course, but also have a roadmap to reach 193. Of course, you guys are living intentionally, and that's amazing. Also, I like to do that too. Many people in life are watching life happen to them, or they're thinking that they can't catch a break. But it's not true, you know? We make choices, and we have to, if we have a goal, we've got to make sure that every choice we make between the gap between now and that goal is bringing us closer to that goal. And I'm doing that, and I know you guys are doing that. So I know that's not targeted to you. You guys are legends for being at 193 or getting there. So thank you for that. So that is my 45 minutes done and dusted, folks. Thank you very much for listening to me rant on my self-indulgent journey of the last 17 years of my life. I hope for you guys, with an audience who's achieved so much, I hope that you guys can also, I hope the message can resonate with you that, yes, you've achieved so much, but it doesn't have to end there. There's always more you can do, there's always more you can achieve, and there's always more people you can inspire. I hope I'm doing that today. I hope you guys can continue to do it. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you again perhaps in the next event. Thank you, guys.